That should be the position.
Thank you. The Honorable Johana Ngeno for purposes of balance, followed by the Honorable Francis Sige.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this particular opportunity to delve into this supplementary budget appropriation bill, number 2 of 2024. Speaker, we all understand that the bill, the process that we are handling today is a process which has gone through, I think it is the first budgetary appropriation that has gone through a lot of turmoil and feelings and of course pains based on some of the cuts, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to also weigh in, and first I want to say that I support in totality, despite the many challenges that are going to accompany this particular appropriation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the budget we had done previously was one of the most expensive budget, and of course we all understand that the only avenues we had so that that budget could go through was of course through funding by our own selves, and that is by taxing the people of this country. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the rest of what happened is just history. What I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is that I want to thank the chairman and the committee for the support they gave to the particular departmental committees on their particular presentations they made, and of course, the aligning of several needs by several departments and of course, the needs of the country. Speaker, I want to state categorically that our Department for Housing, the Speaker, although there were some few adjustments on some of the allocations, we still believe that what has been passed, Mr. Speaker, will be enough to run the State Department and, of course, to do the affordable housing and institutional housings and, of course, hostels and the rest of the other infrastructural activities that are within that particular budgetary proposal. Mr. Speaker, we also believe that although there are so many cuts which were done on other areas, Mr. Speaker, we believe that when the economy of the country rises to the level that we can comfortably allocate money to various activities, then, Mr. Speaker, I think there is a time that we can have some of the activities which has been budgeted, appropriated correctly. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank also the, which of course most of the members here have talked about, the fact that we'll be confirming the 46 or 45,000 JSS teachers. This was a relief, Mr. Speaker, but of course you understand that confirming the 45 does not mean that we are now employing a new ones. We still have the deficit that we always run. When you go to most of the schools, Mr. Speaker, especially the JSS, you'll realize that in every class we have maybe 2 or 3 teachers. And these are the teachers who are going to be teaching or who are teaching more than 10 subjects. So you can imagine how strained most of our schools are. Mr. Speaker, I'm also happy to note that among the issues which were added, Mr. Speaker, is a salary to the police. The police, Mr. Speaker, have been having, I think it is one of the areas where part of the, it is part of the area where it has never had an increment of salaries for quite some times. And I think this has contributed mostly to the issues that we normally have on the sector, because of the insecurities and of course also the laxity among us members of that particular sector, the corruption that is witnessed left, right and center in most of the areas, Mr. Speaker. I think the increment of these salaries, Mr. Speaker, will go a long way to motivate our policemen so that they can actually do their work as is required. Mr. Speaker, there are also so many other things, Mr. Speaker, but my greatest elation, Mr. Speaker, is the reduction on areas where we think there has been a lot of wastages. Mr. Speaker, I've once said, Mr. Speaker, that if we really care about this country, and especially the fact that we cannot be collecting taxes from Kenyans painfully and spend them recklessly on the other side, Mr. Speaker, I've always said that let us collect money, let us collect taxes from our people, but let us also use the taxes that we are collecting from our people prudently so that the pain people go through while they are giving out those monies, Mr. Speaker, is commensurate to the work that is being done by the money that is collected. And I once said, and most of the members even of this House, Mr. Speaker, condemned me. I said, these unnecessary travels, both by this House, both by all the houses, both the Senate and the county assemblies, governors, even the members of the executive, Mr. Speaker, we reduce these travels. We can get a lot of money that can go towards development instead of what is normally utilized for. Mr. Speaker, if you look at some of the areas, like, for example, travels and hospitalities, how much money are we spending on hospitalities, Mr. Speaker? So that when you go to most of these offices, there are so many expensive things which are bought in those offices, and that has nothing to do with the delivery of services. Mr. Speaker, those are things which I would wish every now and then the committee that is concerned with the budget proposals and of course appropriation should look into and ensure that you cut completely all those areas where wastages normally occur. Mr. Speaker, look at the number of vehicles. I'm one of those proponents, Mr. Speaker, who I always thank the great president of this country, who is the third, I think it was the third president, Mheshimiwa Kibaki, for the austerity measures he actually introduced in the government, Mr. Speaker. I remember before he took office, most of the cabinet secretaries, PSS, and everybody else who was working with it, even the CEOs, were driving luxurious vehicles, fuel guzzlers. But the president introduced the use of small vehicles. And Mr. Speaker, I think this is something also that the current president should take into consideration so that whatever wastage that we have in terms of vehicles, one vehicle is enough for whatever travels. One vehicle is enough for a cabinet secretary. One vehicle is enough for a PS, and not all these big vehicles, because where these people are traveling between their homes and the offices is there a short distance, Mr. Speaker. So I think those are the areas that we can use austerity measures to reduce the cost and the wastage that we are spending on those particular areas. Mr. Speaker, look at the counties, Mr. Speaker, how much they are spending their monies. Mr. Speaker, every year we are sending over 350 billion to counties, Mr. Speaker. But when you go and try and search for development that has been done by these monies, Mr. Speaker, most of the money that is sent to every county, Mr. Speaker, 80% goes for luxuries and all those that we call, all that we call maybe salaries, goes for travels, goes for expenditures in those recurrent expenditures, Mr. Speaker, so that you will only get around 20% going for development. Mr. Speaker, every year we are training this country to collect taxes. Every year those monies are sent to the counties. Every year those monies that are sent to the counties, Mr. Speaker, are spent recklessly on matters that does not bring anything to the table on the citizens that we are taxing. Mr. Speaker, I also wish, Mr. Speaker, I don't know what kind of amendment should be brought, Mr. Speaker, towards this allocation that is going towards counties, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the way sometimes some of the CDF expenditures are done, Mr. Speaker, around 90% goes for development, pure development. 10% only goes for recurrent and administration. Mr. Speaker, I wish we bring an amendment, and I wish the Senate should bring an amendment to the Counties Act, Mr. Speaker, so that whatever money is sent to the counties, Mr. Speaker, 80% should go for development. Only 20% should go for recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, if we were to do that, every village, every ward, every constituency in this country, Mr. Speaker, will feel the development of this country. But if things remain the way it is right now, Mr. Speaker, I don't think there is going to be any meaningful development in the country on site. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, we must also, as a House, ensure that whatever we budget, the appropriation that we do to this, in this House, Mr. Speaker, goes towards real development, roads, electricity, water, and of course, the bursaries, Mr. Speaker. When you look at how much we are appropriating every year in this House, Mr. Speaker, and then you go to the village and find there are no roads. Mr. Speaker, I think it is high time also we ensure that we ring fence some of the allocations towards roads in the village.
The Chairman, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me those 2 minutes. You see, Mr. Speaker, if we do what we call equity in the budget appropriation, budget making process, Mr. Speaker, if this country, if we allocate 2.5 billion to every constituency in this country, Mr. Speaker, towards low volume 10-kilometer roads, that money goes only to 145 billion. Mr. Speaker, if we allocate 72 billion, which will be something like 250 million in every constituency, Mr. Speaker, towards water, every village in this country, Mr. Speaker, will feel that there is money being allocated, Mr. Speaker. That is only 72 billion. If you allocate 100 million in every constituency, Mr. Speaker, towards electricity, every village, every household, every school, every center, Mr. Speaker, will feel electricity. And it is only 100 million. That goes to 29 billion in the whole budget, Mr. Speaker. If you overturn the budget that we normally, I mean the bursaries that we normally allocate in CDF, we allocate as counties, you allocate as the national government, the presidential bursaries. Mr. Speaker, if all those monies are collected, it adds to 70 billion. If that money is sent to secondary schools, Mr. Speaker, secondary school education will be free. You will pay nothing. So, Mr. Speaker, when you add all this, the money to roads, to every constituency, the money for water in every constituency, the money for electricity in every constituency, bursaries to every secondary school, Mr. Speaker, that is only 316 billion Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker. How much are we appropriating today? 3 trillion, 4 trillion. But when you go to the village, there is no road. You go to the village, there is no water. You go to the village, there is no electricity. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is high time as this House also we look at how we do our budgets so that we can ring-fence the allocation to the real issues that we have in our villages. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, on the Hustler Fund. Hustler Fund was one of the the best introduction to our economy by His Excellency the President. But you see, Mr. Speaker, it has not been felt correctly in the ground. It is actually behaving like the Fuliza that we used to have in our systems. Mr. Speaker, if you divide the 50 billion that we allocate to Hustler Fund among us 290 constituencies, every constituency will go with 172 million. 172 million, Mr. Speaker. If the groups, or if it is injected in the usual ways of fund, we will have several groups in our villages, Mr. Speaker, especially youth groups, women groups, getting this money, and this money will be properly in circulation, and people would have felt it. Unlike what we have now, people have borrowed these like Fuliza, and they have disappeared. Some of them have just thrown away their SIM cards, and they are not paying back. So, Mr. Speaker, I think also this House has to take up the role of appropriating the Hustler Fund to be taken directly to the constituency so that youths and women can form groups and get empowered through this money. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I thank this House, and I support.
Thank you, Chairman. The Honorable Commissioner Ambassador Francis Sigei, MP for Sutik.